Hey everyone, it's Lisa Stens from Lisa's Creative Corner. I am super excited about this month's video collaboration with the creative design team. Normally we only post once a month, but this month we're posting every single day. We're doing a video series called the 31 Days of Christmas, where we're going to be sharing a new video every single day with a new Christmas card. And I will be posting every Saturday. We're going to be taking turns. Tomorrow you'll find a video from Andrea, who will be posting every Sunday this month. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put a link down below to each of the creative design team members' YouTube channels so that you can subscribe so you won't miss out on any of the fun and excitement. And I'm also going to be creating a playlist so that you can go back and watch the videos that you may have missed or your favorite videos that you might want to watch again. So the playlist will be down below as well. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get started with this Slimline card that I made. I'm going to teach you how to make this background and the poinsettia and all kinds of fun techniques on this card. And the funny thing is, this is the very first Slimline card that I have ever made. I know they're great cards, but I was hesitant because I did not have any envelopes. So I went ahead and I created a design space file for a Slimline envelope, just like this one. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna put a link down below to that design space file so that you can make coordinating envelopes for your Slimline cards as well. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna teach you how to make this fun card. I'm going to start by making the background of the card by using some Distress Oxide inks and smudging them directly onto my craft mat. I actually did a Distress Oxide ink video series and I still had them out on my workspace, so I thought, why not use them for a background for my card? So after I spritzed them with some water to activate the inks, I took a piece of Distress Watercolor cardstock and I just placed it right on top of the wet ink. And I'm just kind of moving it around on my base here and trying to get ink in different areas. And since I know this is going to be a Christmas card, I wanted to go with sort of a green background. And so I had two different green colors. I had the peeled paint and the mowed lawn, but I wanted to create a little bit more of a varied shade of green. So I used the chip sapphire, peacock feathers, and then some mustard seed and kind of mixed those together to get another shade of green. So after putting them on the card base and drying it with the heat tool, I went ahead and added a little bit more ink, spritzed it again, and I'm just adding another layer here. Now I'm going to go ahead and dry that with my heat tool again. And I'm going to repeat this process a couple of times, and each time I do this, it's going to add a little bit more texture to the background. And after doing this last layer, I'm going to go ahead and spritz a little bit of water directly on the background. So once I do that and let it sit for a minute, I'm going to take a paper towel and dab it up. And as you can see, it leaves a little bit of a bleached look, a little bit of white speckles on it, which I think is just a nice, fun look for this watercolor background. So now I'm going to go ahead and repeat the process again, add more ink to my craft mat and some more water, and I'm going ahead and just adding it right on top again. And I'm going to do this again, like I said, a couple of times just to continue to build on it. And by drying it in between with the heat tool, it just makes it so that the colors will lay on top of each other instead of blending and getting too muddy. So here I'm heat setting it again with the heat tool, and I like to heat it on both sides. When I heat the back, it dries it a little bit faster. So I flip it over, heat the front, heat the back again. And now that it's dry, I'm going to go ahead and spritz some more water and let it sit for a second and then dab it up with the paper towel, and you can see it just leaves these really fun splotches. So I'm going to repeat this process just one more time, add a little bit more green. It had a little too much blue on it, and so I wanted to add a little more green to make it look a little more Christmassy and a little more festive. So I'm going to be repeating this process again and heat setting it once again, and I think I'm kind of liking the way that this is turning out. So I'm going to go ahead and spritz it one more time with some water and wipe it up with a little bit of a paper towel, and I think this is it. I think I'm really happy with the way that this background has turned out. I could add more and more layers and continue to layer it, but I think I'm done, and I'm going to go ahead and heat set this one final time on both sides, and then just to make it as flat as possible, I'm going to put some heavy blocks on top of it to let it dry completely. So now I'm going to go ahead and stamp the sentiment. I'm using this floral alphabet stamp set, which you would normally think would be more springy or something more florally, even summery, but I thought the flowers possibly could look a little bit like poinsettias if I used red and green. So I stamped the word Noel, and I'm going to use the dark red and the dull green tri-blend markers. And I'm just going to color in these flowers. I know they're not poinsettias, but they look kind of like them a little bit. I don't know, maybe. So I went ahead and colored the flowers with the red, and now I'm going to color the leaves in with the dull green marker. And later on I may use some little sparkles or possibly some stickles in the center of the flowers. So once I have the flowers and leaves colored in, I'm going to go ahead and set that aside and work on the actual poinsettia that I'm going to put on the side of the card. So I die cut this image using the Comfort and Joy Cricut collection, and I'm inking the edges of this scarlet cardstock, and then I used a scarlet pattern paper from the Comfort and Joy pattern paper collection as well for one of the layers. And I'm just taking a sponge dauber and sponging the ink on the edges of these die cut pieces, and then I'll layer them on top of each other once they're done. So now I'm going to take some New England Ivy ink and do the same thing on this layer. This is like the leaves that are going to go underneath the poinsettia flowers. And then I'm going to take some almond ink and do the same thing and ink up the center of the flower, the top layer of the center of the flower right there. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm just adding a little bit of ink to darken up that top layer. So before I adhere the layers together, I'm going to go ahead and curl the ends of those petals. I'm going to curl them with my fingernail, and I'm going to curl them out, and then I'm going to curl them in so they kind of come out from the center and then they come down on the edges. So I'm just taking my fingernail and sort of scraping it along the cardstock to bend it. You can use a bone folder if you have one. You can even use something round like a pen that's smooth if you don't want to use your fingernails. But I find my fingernails just make it a lot easier, and I always have them handy. So once I have all the layers curled down, I'm going to go ahead and adhere them together with some liquid glue. And I like to use liquid glue because it gives me a little play time to turn the petals to get them the way that I want them to go. So the poinsettia is finished. I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. Now that that watercolor cardstock piece is dry, I'm going to go ahead and adhere that to a piece of the Comfort and Joy patterned scarlet paper, and this is just going to give me a nice thin border all the way around. It's probably about almost 1/8 of an inch border all the way around. And I'm going to mat that to my final card base. Now I created my final card base from a piece of white daisy cardstock that was 8.5 inches wide by 7 inches tall, and I scored it to create an 8.5 by 3.5 inch card. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere that again in the center, so there's about 1/8 of an inch border on all sides. And after matting the sentiment piece to another piece of the patterned cardstock, I went ahead and adhered it just to the right side of the center of the card. And you saw me open the card. I don't know if you've done this before, but I have definitely matted my cards upside down, so I just wanted to make sure my card opened up the proper way before I adhered that sentiment. And now I created actually 2 different poinsettias. One was a little bit smaller and one was a little bit larger, and I'm trying to decide here if I want to go with the smaller one or the one that's a little bit bigger. And I think I decided that the one that's a little bit bigger is going to work better. So I added a little piece of 3D foam tape underneath, and I'm going to go ahead and adhere that to the left side of that sentiment panel. Now I'm just slipping a few little pieces of fern that I cut out from some cardstock underneath that flower, to finish off that portion. I'm going to fluff up the flower a little bit because it got kind of flat when I was pushing down on it to adhere it to the card. Now I'm going to try to figure out what to put in the center of those little flowers. I'm thinking that these bitty sparkles are going to work better than the stickles that I was initially thinking of. So I'm going to go ahead and put a clear sparkle in the center of each of those little flowers. And I like to use my piercing tool to maneuver these little guys because they're so tiny and they stick to my fingers. So the piercing tool works really well. And I wasn't sure if the clear was going to work, so I took the red marker that I used to color in the flowers and I colored in a few of the clear sparkles just to make them red. And I put them on, I wasn't sure, so what I ended up doing was I put a clear sparkle on every other flower and then I used the red sparkle on every other flower. So it's got a little bit of both. I wasn't sure which I liked better, so I went ahead and just did every other flower that way. So now my card is finished and I think it turned out pretty well. And as I mentioned earlier, I created an envelope in Design Space that would fit this card perfectly. So I'm going to put a link below to this template that I created in Design Space so that you'll be able to create your own envelopes for your Slimline cards as well. I hope you enjoyed this video today, and I hope that you will come back tomorrow to visit Andrea's channel to see what she has for you. And don't forget to subscribe to each of our channels to see all 31 of our wonderful, fun, festive cards this month. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you over at Andrea's channel tomorrow. Bye-bye.